documents. I was pleased to see he reached a firm conclusion that no charges should be brought against me in this case. This was an exhaustive investigation going back more than 40 years, even into the 1970s when I was still a new United States Senator. The special counsel acknowledged I cooperated completely. I did not throw up any roadblocks. I sought no delays. In fact, I was so determined to give the special counsel what he needed, I went forward with a 5-hour in-person interview over 2 days on October the 8th and 9th of last year, even though Israel had just been attacked by Hamas on the 7th and I was very occupied. It was in the middle of handling an international crisis. I was especially pleased to see special counsel make clear the stark distinction and difference between this case and Mr. Trump's case. The special counsel wrote, and I quote, "Several material distinctions between Mr. Trump's case and Mr. Biden's are clear," continuing to quote, "Most notably, after given multiple chances to return classified documents to avoid prosecution, Mr. Trump allegedly did the opposite. According to the indictment, he not only refused to return the documents for many months, he also obstructed justice by enlisting others to destroy evidence and then to lie about it. In contrast, we went on to say Mr. Biden turned in classified documents to the National Archives and the Department of Justice, consented to the search of multiple locations, including his home, sat for a voluntary interview, and in other ways cooperated with the investigation," end of quote. I've seen the headlines since the report was released about my willful retention of documents. These assertions are not only misleading, they're just plain wrong. On page 215, if you had a chance, I know it's a thick document. On page 215, the report of the special counsel found the exact opposite. Here's what he wrote. "There is, in fact, a shortage of evidence that I willfully retained classified materials related to Afghanistan." On page 12, the special counsel also wrote, for another documents, "The decision to decline criminal charges was straightforward. The evidence suggests that Mr. Biden did not willfully retain these documents. The evidence said I did not willfully retain these documents. In addition, I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented. I wear, since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of... Every Memorial Day, we hold a service remembering him, attended by friends and family and the people who loved him. I don't need anyone to remind me when he passed away or passed away. Simple truth is I sat for a 5-hour interview over 2 days of events going back 40 years. At the same time I was managing an international crisis, their task was to make a decision about whether to move forward with charges in this case. That's their decision to make. That's the counsel's decision to make. That's his job. And they decided not to move forward. For any extraneous commentary, they don't know what they're talking about. It has no place in this report. The bottom line is the matter is now closed. I'm going to continue what I've always focused on, my job of being President of the United States of America. Now, thank you, and I'll take some questions.
President Biden, something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
Do you feel
my
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Mr. President.
Do voters have concerns about your age? How are you going to assuage them? And do you fear that this report is only going to fuel further concerns about your age?
Only by some of you.
Mr. President,
Criminal liability today
Mr. President, do you take responsibility for at least being careless with classified material?
I take responsibility for not having seen exactly what my staff was doing. It goes in and points out things that appeared in my garage, things that came out of my home, things that were moved not by me, but my staff.
Mr. President, for months when you were asked about your age, you would respond with the words, "Watch me." Many American people have been watching, and they have expressed concerns about your age.
That is your judgment. That is your judgment. That is not the judgment of the press.
They expressed concerns about your mental acuity. They say that you are too old. Mr. President, in December, you told me that you believe there are many other Democrats who could defeat Donald Trump. So why does it have to be you now? What is your answer to that question?
Because I'm the most qualified person in this country to be President of the United States and finish the job I started.
Do you believe that? Why are you confusing the names of world leaders?
Thank you, everyone.
I did not share classified information. I did not share it.
With your ghostwriter.
With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not.
But the special counsel said in the
Well, no,
report
he
that he
did
did.
not say that.
Okay.
He did not say that.
But Mr. President, one of the...
Let me answer your question. The fact of the matter is, what I didn't want repeated, I didn't want him to know, and I didn't read it to him, was I had written a long memorandum to President Obama why we should not be in Afghanistan. And I was multiple pages. And so what I was referring to, I said classified. I should have said should be private because it was a contact between the president and the vice president as to what was going on. That's what he was referring to. It was not classified information in that document. That was not classified.
He called on me. When you look back at this incident, is there anything you would do differently now? And do you think that a special prosecutor should have been appointed in the first place in both of these cases?
First of all, what I would have done is overseen the transfer of the material that was in my office, in my offices. I should have done that. If I go back, I didn't have the responsibility to do that. That was my staff was supposed to do that, and they referenced that in the report. And my staff did not do it in the way that, for example, I didn't know how half the boxes got in my garage until I found out staff gathered them up, put them together, and took them to the garage in my home. And all the stuff that was in my home was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. It was in my house. It wasn't out like in Mar-a-Lago in a public place and none of it was high classified. Didn't have any of that red stuff on it. You know what I mean, around the corners? None of that. And so I wish I had paid more attention to how the documents were being moved and where. I thought they were being moved to the archives. I thought all of it was being moved. That's what I thought. Now, what was the last part of your question?
Whether a special counsel should have been appointed in this case and in the case of your rival president, former president.
I think a special counsel should have been appointed. And the reason I think a special counsel should have been appointed is because I did not want to be in a position that they looked at Trump and weren't going to look at me, just like they looked at the vice president. And the fact is they made a firm conclusion. I did not break the law, period. Thank you all very, very much. The hostage negotiation, look. I'm of the view, as you know, that the conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side. I've been pushing really hard to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza. There are a lot of innocent people who are starving, a lot of innocent people who are in trouble and dying. And it's got to stop, number one. Number two, I was also in the position that I'm the guy that made the case that we have to do much more to increase the amount of material going in, including fuel, including other items. I've been on the phone with the Qataris, I've been on the phone with the Egyptians, I've been on the phone with the Saudis to get as much aid as we possibly can into Gaza. There are innocent people, innocent women and children who are also in badly in need of help. And so that's what we're pushing. And I'm pushing very hard now to deal with this hostage ceasefire because, I've been working tirelessly in this deal. How can I say this without revealing it? To lead to a sustained pause in the fighting, in the actions taking place in the Gaza Strip. And because I think if we can get the delay for that, the initial delay, I think that we would be able to extend that so that we could increase the prospect that this fighting in Gaza changes. There's also negotiations. You may recall, in the very beginning, right before Hamas attacked, I was in contact with the Saudis and others to work out a deal where they would recognize Israel's right to exist, make them part of the Middle East, and recognize them fully in return for certain things that the United States would commit to do. And the commitment that we were proposing to do related to two items. I'm not going to go in detail, but one of them was to deal with the protection against their arch enemy to the northwest, northeast, I should say. The second one, by providing ammunition and material for them to defend themselves. Coincidentally, that's the time frame when this broke out. I have no proof what I'm about to say, but it's not unreasonable to suspect that the Hamas understood what was about to take place and wanted to break it up before it happened.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to need everybody to hold for a moment.
We have just seen the president speaking there from the White House, referring to the special counsel's report. The president said, "I did not break the law." He blamed his staff for the handling of the classified documents, said he should have overseen it more closely, in referring to the date of his son's death, which the special counsel mentioned in his report, and the president's inability to remember that date. The president said that when asked about it in that 5-hour interview, he said it wasn't any of his damn business, referring to the special counsel or the special counsel's team. He went on to say that, read portions of the report in which he said that he had been forthcoming and made comparisons with former President Trump, who is also being investigated, and noted the various ways in which the former president is being investigated for obstruction and for not cooperating. In an effort to show his facility with the job, he took questions. There was a lot of shouting, questions about his age, in a reference to negotiations going on about the hostages being held by Hamas. He referred to the president of Egypt, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, as the president of Mexico. And that's about the recap of the president's remarks tonight. Let's bring in CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge, who's just outside the Justice Department, and CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe in Las Vegas. Catherine, first to you. The president also said that a key conversation that he had with his ghostwriter on his book, which was captured and contained in the report, and check me if my facts are wrong here, in which he said he had to go get classified materials. He said that it wasn't actual classified materials, that he should have said it was a personal communication with the president. Assess that, because it's one of the key points. Was he sharing this classified material? And then his overall defense of his conduct relative to the report itself.
Well, his overall defense of the handling of classified information is that there are stark differences between his case and that of the former President Donald Trump. He says that in his case there was cooperation, when the allegation against former President Trump is that there was distrust with the investigation, that there was destruction of evidence, and there was obstruction. On the issue of speaking with this ghostwriter, it's a little bit more complicated than what the president just told reporters. What he didn't mention is that the ghostwriter, once he learned of the investigation, deleted audio tapes of those interviews. They were eventually recovered by the FBI, and the special counsel considered charging this ghostwriter in connection with the destruction of what was very important evidence. And there seems to not be a meeting of the minds as to what was discussed with that ghostwriter rose to the level of classified information. We don't have the benefit, John, of looking at these records independently so that we could really understand whether it's an executive privilege issue, as he says, between himself and then President Obama, or whether it is, in fact, a classification issue.
And then quickly, Catherine, on this question of staff, he basically said, and there's some of this in the actual report, he said essentially this was staff work when they were leaving the White House, and that the staff put the boxes in various places. He seemed at one point to claim that anything that was classified was in a secure location, which the pictures from the special counsel's report would seem to contradict. But what do you make of, I mean, in addition to the fact that he's essentially blaming his staff, what do you make of that relative to what's in the actual special counsel's report?
Well, the special counsel does say very clearly that there was a reasonable doubt, probably in the mind of a jury, as to whether the former Vice President, Joe Biden, understood that some of these records were being moved in his offices, that he had directed that. It could have happened without him knowing. But the part of the report that the president has neglected is these personal notebooks. These personal notebooks included his detailing of these highly classified briefings, the President's Daily Brief, National Security Council meetings, and there's no suggestion in the special counsel report that they were ever securely maintained, and there's no suggestion that he had the authority to maintain those notebooks that had classified information. Because the bottom line is that it doesn't matter what the classified information looks like, whether it's got a big top secret red label on the top of it, or whether it's contained in a personal notebook. As far as the intelligence community is concerned, what's in that notebook, if it's classified, it doesn't matter that there are no stamps on it. So that's sort of where I would leave the conversation there.
Right, and that was a distinction he was making, and yours, and you've fact-checked him on that. Catherine Herridge, thank you so much. Now let's bring in Ed O'Keefe in Las Vegas. Okay, Ed, let's just deal for a moment with the report itself. Give me your read on the timing and the fact that the president did this evening. He doesn't come out every time his name is in the news. Give me your sense of what their intention was at the start.
John, what you just saw there is the beginning of an attempt by this White House to now more aggressively explain and defend the president, what he's done, what he wants to do going forward. For the last year plus, since CBS News broke word of this special counsel investigation, you'll recall it was our Adriana Diaz who started all this and revealed to the world that this was happening. The White House has sort of stumbled out of the gate to explain itself and then understood almost immediately it could say very little publicly in the political and communication space in order to ensure today's resolution, a special counsel concluding that there were no charges to be brought. So by playing by the rules and being cooperative with the prosecutors, the issue, in the view of the president, the case is closed. And legally, it is. Politically now, however, given that special prosecutor's report today that raises specific instances when he could not recall certain things, including, as the report says, the day of his son's death, it gives Republicans and other critics of the president catnip to pull from and say, look, if a professional prosecutor has concluded this, why should he be present?
Right. And
Down the street from us here in Las Vegas tonight, the former president, Donald Trump, will be here. Undoubtedly, he will begin to use this special counsel's conclusions to his advantage on the stump as he continues prosecuting the case against the sitting president.
The conclusions with respect to age, not the conclusions with respect to the fact that Biden cooperated and Trump not only didn't cooperate, but is alleged of essentially orchestrating a scheme of obstruction. What do you make of the so the White House, the president, took on head-on this question of his memory, and particularly on the question of of the date of his son, Beau Biden's death. And he said that when he was asked about it, he said that it wasn't any of his damn business, referring, I presume, to the special counsel or whoever was doing the questioning. An effort there to go on offense, obviously, on this very specific question of his ability to recollect. And he also mentioned that he was, quote, I was very occupied, it having been right in the middle of the response to the Hamas attack on October 7th.
Yeah. So on the issue of his son and conjuring up sympathies for that, the White House knows, the president knows, there is great sympathy and understanding for his incredible loss, that of his son. And anyone who covers him, anyone who follows him on a regular basis knows that date affects him and afflicts him unlike anything else. And frankly, is his whole reason for being president, because he realized he had to do this after his son had told him on his deathbed, in essence, keep fighting, keep going. So it is the whole reason for why he decided to run again for president. But on this idea that he had to do this while dealing with a global crisis, well, look, respectfully, Mr. President, I think voters would tell you, and they've told us, you should be able to do multiple things at once, be they domestic, foreign, or personal, and still be able to ably serve. And it will feed into the perceptions that voters continue to tell us about, even though he disputed that in the exchange with reporters, that there is concern about whether he can continue to serve 4 more years into his 80s as president. And what we don't know, John, because the polling can't entirely tell us this, do they not want him to be president for all those reasons they're concerned about? Can he do the job day to day? Or do they not want him to do it because they just feel bad for somebody that old having to hold this job? Why didn't he decide to step aside for a younger candidate? And we're going to see between now and Election Day how this continues to play out, how voters think about it. The hope at the White House is, okay, it's February, let's get this out of the way, let's move on. Let's be able to contrast what the president did in the legal space with what the former president, Donald Trump, continues to face today at the Supreme Court, in the coming days in other courts in New York and Florida and Georgia, and hope that voters ultimately conclude he's the better option. I want to say one other thing about what you saw there, because that was an incredibly loud and chaotic exchange. John, you've served at the White House. When I'm not out on the road, I've served at the White House. And you know that this president has been far less accessible and has done these kinds of exchanges with reporters far less frequently than his predecessors. Part of the reason in the past year is because his lawyers told him and his staff was telling him, let's not put you in a position to have to take questions on this specific report. Well, now that it's done, and it very clearly says there's no law broken, he feels a bit liberated to start going on the offensive a little more. That we yell that nobody was there to police it, that's on the president. He can decide who to call on, and he could have asked, hey, one at a time, raise your hands and I'll call on you. Speaker Boehner used to do that. President Obama used to do that. He just doesn't do that. So it looked ugly. It was chaotic. But it's in part because it is rare that he does this. And when he does, he so rarely tries to police the situation and allows it to get that noisy.
And the transposition of the Mexican and Egyptian president will no doubt...
It's Exhibit A. It's exactly what what voters have said, what people in his own party, what people who serve in Democratic politics right now in leadership positions say they're worried about, because it just adds up. And they know that ultimately that's the kind of thing that could stop him from getting reelected. Sisi is the president of Egypt. That's what he was talking about. Right. And by the way, that's the other headline of the night. Did he not say that the Israeli response in Gaza now is too excessive?
Yes, that's exactly.
That's a notable statement now.
You're exactly right. Thank you for bringing that up. I noted that as well. The president managing the borders of Gaza and the southern border in America. Presumably those are both on his mind. Ed O'Keefe, appreciate it. Thank you. Jessica Levenson joins us now with more analysis. She's CBS News legal contributor and professor at Loyola Law School. Jessica, you've had a long day dealing with the Supreme Court, so I guess, what is your takeaway from any of this stuff with respect to the special counsel's report? I'm putting you on the spot here after spending a day concerned with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
Well, I think my takeaway is that there is a vast difference between the story of President Biden and how he should not have had classified documents and impermissibly stored those classified documents, and former President Trump and how he had classified documents and did not properly store them. Because the beginning of the story sounds very similar. We have a former vice president and a former president, and each of them have classified documents. And in each case, there's no question that they shouldn't have them. And in each case, I think the American public doesn't want to hear, it was my staff, doesn't want to hear, well, my house is locked. If classified documents are supposed to be kept a specific way, then they're supposed to be kept a specific way. But the stories diverge greatly after that. And so legally speaking, not thinking about the politics of this, which I think is not great for the current president, but thinking about the law, in my mind, I can't stop thinking about one word, and that's obstruction. And when it comes to the current president and how he treated the situation, I think there can be no serious claim here of obstruction. There can be serious claims that he engaged in, that he did things he should not have done. But when it comes to the former president and why he is the one facing criminal charges and why he is the one on the receiving end of federal indictment and the current president is not, it keeps, to me, coming back to obstruction, because we know that the stories, as I said, diverge so greatly, where the National Archives, the Department of Justice, the FBI, saying to the former president, apparently over and over again, give us those documents, where the allegations indicate that he refused, that he apparently tried to hide and or destroy those documents. That's what I think, taking the politics out of it, if you're a prosecutor, why do we have different outcomes here? That's the reason.
It's an excellent point. The current president may blame his staff, but the allegations are with the former president that he engaged in a multiple stage effort to move those documents around, give only portions of them, give guidance to his staff to only give portions of them back. So the key distinction being both that Biden willfully turned over and was interviewed, and former President Trump did not. And then Biden, there's no evidence of, not only no evidence, no assertion of lack of cooperation or obstruction, whereas that's the heart of the case against the former president. Jessica Levenson, thank you for doing all this great work for us. We're really grateful. We're going to take a quick break. More news ahead. You're streaming CBS News.
Well, let me start with this.
This really happened.
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time.